evening, and welcome to the show. This is the First Amendment, historically speaking, and I will be your host today. My name is Frederick Douglass Dixon, and as always, I would like to thank UPTV for allowing us to have this small time to connect with those who are in the viewing audience, Urbana, Champaign, and our larger area. And without their help, we would not be able to attempt to forward what we know as esoteric information. So this avenue is very important. So I'd like to thank all of the UPTV staff, as well as young brother Yusef, who's a very dear help. So I thank him so much as well. Well, today, being the first week of February, the anticipatory questions and the anticipatory thought today would be about Black History Month, how it came about, who we should look to, and a question about, does Black History Month need a makeover? So those are to be the overarching themes that we'll begin to discuss today. So the first question, or comment, excuse me, the first comment about Black History Month, I would like to erase some of the historical falsehoods, half-truths, and misnomers about this particular month, why it was chosen for Black History Month and by whom. So when we talk about Black History Month, we talk of the Honorable Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Dr. Carter G. Woodson was himself one of our most astute and brilliant historians who wrote long lines of work that exhibited his brilliance, but nothing more so than his development of Negro History Week, February 1926. In that time, he chose February because February was itself. Well, what do we hear all the time? We hear all the time that, well, why do they give us the shortest month of the year for Black History Month? Which, after a while, becomes one of the only questions that we ask. But we need to be far more historically grounded in accuracy to be able to answer that question. So what Dr. Carter G. Woodson understood and what he thought was important begins to come to life during February. Now, when we say Carter G. Woodson, I want to be very specific. The middle initial, G, is for Godwin. Not Goodwin, but Godwin, which indeed, if you just heard what I said, ties him to a higher being. Dr. Carter Godwin Woodson, I would agree that what he left behind, his brilliance, is definitely tied into a God, and a God that would bless a Black man with the brilliance to have left something behind that now we look to as a source of pride, a source of unity, and a thing that builds integrity. So Black History Month is indeed important. And the reason he chose February, scientifically and historically, the reason why he chose February was because he liked and had a fascination for Frederick Douglass, whose birthday was in February. He also had an affinity for what Abraham Lincoln represented as far as being one who was considered to emancipate the slave. So during February, you do have President's Day. You do have Lincoln's birthday. Now, those two have been lumped together for some time, Washington and Lincoln's birthday, but it still falls in February, as well as Frederick Douglass' birthday, who is said to be February 14th. Now, we're still unsure of the day that Frederick Douglass was born, because one thing that was always kept from the slave was his birth date. So over the years during Frederick Douglass' life, he finds out closer to the end of his life. Now, Frederick Douglass is said to be born February 14th, 1818. Well, his grandmother said that he was born February 14th. This gives us insight into how the slave's birthday became monumental or connected to events around that time in which they were born. A famine, a feast, a war, another person's birthday. So they didn't know exactly when they were born because the slave was never to know exactly when they was born. But his grandmother chose February 14th simply because he was her sweetheart. So as complex as this sounds, there is some humanity that's simplistic that goes along with it. So what February 14th, 1818 Dr. Carter G. Woodson mastered that. He mastered history. He mastered the understanding of forwarding history. So his brilliance allows us to claim February as the month that we would look to find out exactly what the Negro did in history. And the reason that he chose it, and we'll quote his words, that the black man could accurately have a participating role in raising the government and being a part of the body politic if he knew who he was and the accurate accomplishments of the black person and the black people was recorded. So this was an attempt to historically document what had happened prior to his 1926 birth of Negro History Week. So he wanted to accurately document the accomplishments of blacks that had already gone past as a sense of pride and as a sense of hope. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson understood the importance of having a historical time frame that reflected accurately the victories and triumphs of blacks here in America, especially after slavery and Reconstruction, as one would say from the book, Up from Slavery. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson, in his brilliance, creates Negro History Week, February 1926. Also, the founder of ASALH, the Association for the Study of African Life and History, which just had in 2015 its one-year anniversary, which was founded at the University of Chicago. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who, because of his lot in life as a young person, was not able to attend school full-time. So he had to work in the fields part-time and go to school part-time. So he enters high school as a little bit older than most of the students. So he comes in high school right around 17 or 18 and he's done by 20. And before long, he's graduated from a number of colleges and he comes back as principal in 10 years to be the principal of that school. So his brilliance is apparent to us. And one thing that we have to look to as a symbol of Dr. Carter G. Woodson's brilliance is the 1933 classic, The Miseducation of the Negro. This book in itself is a classic. Now, I want to give a functional definition of a classic when it comes to literary work. A functional definition of a classic entails the work itself being as important today, 2016, as when it was written in 1933. Yes, Dr. Carter G. Woodson's Miseducation of the Negro not only falls into that category, but it obliterates any parameters that fall into that category. Because when we talk about the miseducation of the Negro, we can talk about things that are going on today in our Chicago public school, in our public school system, in Chicago, in Champaign, in Urbana, in Los Angeles, in Detroit, in Philadelphia, in New York. They all have the same themes, that there is a miseducation going on culturally for this black man and these young black children in a formal educational setting. So one thing that we have to realize that education does, it informs us. So when we look at history, history is one way for us to improve on how we will become more advanced in the future as a society. But what history does not tell us exactly where we should go and how we should get there. It only gives us an example of what has already been done and how we should be able to surpass those particular advancements. So history in itself is tied to power. History in itself is tied to education very deeply. And he talked about the miseducation of the Negro. And let's go to chapter 1, which symbolically is the intro to what Dr. Carter G. Woodson was saying in 1933, and he says it very succinctly. He calls it the seat of trouble. He calls formal education for the black man, woman, and child the seat of trouble. And he begins to talk about it in the first paragraph in chapter 1, and I'm paraphrasing now. And he says, without equivocation, that the black man is taught to look honorably to other races and to look to himself in an inferior role. So, chapter 1, Paragraph 1, he begins to set the stage. Why we missed the mark is another topic heading. Why we are adrift. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson, we owe him so very much from 1926 up until 1976 when it becomes Black History Month. A huge transformation. These all tie into the social movements that had gone on in between 1926 and 1976. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson begins to explain to us that education has been the linchpin for our miseducation. Well, when we think about it, one knows that in the past, for a young person to enter kindergarten and to be taught their letters and numbers, to become literate and to become a participant in civic society, one has to realize prior to becoming literate in school, one is taught to be patriotic by saying and regurgitating over and over consistently with scathing repetition the Pledge of Allegiance. So when you're 5 years old, 4 years old, or how old one is when they go to kindergarten, they begin to learn prior to them becoming literate how to be patriotic. So we begin to look at the education right there, or what Dr. Carter G. Woodson called it, the miseducation. So what are we taught about ourselves? Especially blacks here in the wilderness of North America, what are we taught about ourselves once we get to kindergarten? Well, we're taught that the founding fathers were great men, and outside of the greatness of great white men, we don't find many people at the beginning of this country, at the birth of this country, who had forwarded a lot or forwarded thoughts that became part of the body politic, which I find to be, as Dr. Carter G. Woodson said, it's miseducation. It's a misunderstanding of what actually happened. Now, Dr. John Hope Franklin puts it well when he said there must be a distinguishing difference between what has happened and what those who have written said happened. Agreed. The Miseducation of the Negro is one book that is mandated, especially for those of you all who want and desire to be educators, those who ascribe to forward information for our children for their betterment. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson and the start of Negro History Week, February 1926, is indeed an iconic moment. It is indeed a stick in the mud for what he understood would raise the consciousness amongst the masses of blacks. So if by the time you're in high school you have not read The Miseducation of the Negro, you have to begin to wonder why. You have to begin to wonder that you can talk about Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who was a brilliant man and the second black man to graduate Harvard University with a PhD. Now that's an accomplishment in itself to get a PhD from Harvard, but to be the second black man ever to graduate Harvard University with a PhD is well worth our note-taking and it's well worth our praise. The very first being W.E.B., the doctor, the sociologist, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. So these two great men have left the path. And Dr. Carter G. Woodson even left a time for us to celebrate, which since our miseducation, we take the wrong idea about the month he chose because we are not attuned. There are quotes in the Bible. One said that my people suffer not for a lack of material culture, not for a lack of spirituality, not for a lack of talent, not for a lack of fortitude, but my people suffer because of a lack of knowledge. This is indeed true. So we want to move along and talk about February, Black History Month, and what is it now? What has it been and how has it been packaged today? Well, when we think about it today, we have a group of what folks call the usual suspects. The usual suspects during Black History Month is normally the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You will have a slice of Rosa Parks and her importance. You may have some Marcus Garvey, which is not promised. You may just have a little bit of W.E.B. Du Bois, which is not promised. You will have to talk about Dr. Carter G. Woodson, which is not promised during the lesson. So indeed, we probably, as a group of people, have to forward information that shines the light of understanding under the searchlight of truth so that our youths can be more tuned to esoteric information and those who have come and left blueprints for their success. So it'll be very hard to talk about Haiti in 1804 during Black History Month and not understand the victory of Louis Overton, and his understanding in 1804 of Haiti winning its independence and how he whipped Napoleon and the French. So when we begin to talk about esoteric information, we need to understand that there are brilliant men and women during Black History Month that we don't hear a lot about. David Walker, 1829, and his appeal to the colored people and the colored citizens of America. So David Walker in 1829, he begins to talk directly about removing the shackles of slavery, and those means that you should use should not exclude violence. He said this in 1829, which I ask the question all the time if we talk about Nat Turner, and there will be a biopic that comes out about Nat Turner that we see that is being forwarded to us all over the social media. And that is a topic that we'll tie into another time, but to understand 1829 and David Walker's appeal and this pamphlet being so very popular in 1831, Southampton County, Virginia, Nat Turner, the question is critically, did Nat Turner, who was a literate man, read David Walker's appeal? Now we're talking about Black history. Now we're questioning some of the things that we know to be removed and lessened for a specific purpose, so that you continue to be in a pickle and in a quandary and caught between a hawk and a buzzard because we lack knowledge. And when we understand the compromise of 1850 as we go forward, and we understand Frederick Douglass and Martin Delany, we need to be able to pull these people apart and what it is that they left us, because the words are still here. Although you can't find them on YouTube, but you can find them in your local library. So some of these people we need to discuss. The Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and the United Negro Improvement Association. Some of these esoteric information and these sources of information are just not readily available for our children. And the reason is so that they have to find heroes elsewhere that don't look just like them. So in Black History Month, as far as education in an overarching picture, and I want to use that symbolically, that connection to a picture. If I were to take a picture, bow, right now, with a group of people, and the picture was developed very quickly and handed to me, who's the first person I would look for? Sorry, with our arrogance and our ego and our vanity, 9 times out of 10, when we get a picture, the first if we're in that picture, the first person we look to is ourselves. Now the question and the trouble and the problem becomes, what happens when you look at that picture and you don't see yourself? You begin to be forced to look to other people in that light that represents you, which is not fair, it's not accurate, and furthermore, it's confusing. So during February 1926 and beyond, Dr. Carter G. Woodson was injecting the accurate accomplishments of blacks into the picture of what America had become, with historically accurate facts that would indeed intervene in the mental life and raise the consciousness of the masses of blacks. So it's very important that we continue to honor Dr. Carter G. Woodson and take February as a very serious month to sit down and have conversations about people that we don't normally talk about on a regular basis. But yes, it's indeed good to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King. It is imperative that we understand Dr. Martin Luther King's brilliance. It's imperative that we understand Brother Malcolm X's fortitude and brilliance. Yes, during those times, it's very important But it's also important that we talk about Ella Baker, who was indeed the hero to I don't know how many organizations, but we know SNCC, we know CORE, we know the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. She had a hand in all of those organizations becoming popular. And if we talk about Ella Baker, then we must indeed talk about Fannie Lou Hamer. So some of these names, although they sound foreign to my young population, and maybe even your parents, which is indeed a problem, that if you as a parent don't have the understanding of Nat Turner, David Walker, Martin Delaney, Frederick Douglass, and their greatness, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, Malcolm X, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Nation of Islam, the Black Panther Party, and what it is that they went through on a regular basis to leave us this historical documentation about how to organize, about how to move forward, then your children stand less of a time finding themselves in the picture of society and being forced to choose other avenues to find their own identity. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson does an excellent job in forwarding the power of identity right in a time where lynching in February 26 was the standard, was the norm. Lynching as a spectacle, lynching as a dehumanizing population, to dehumanize a population, as well as to protect the sanctity of white women. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, very brilliant in his approach. Ida B. Wells, the anti-lynching crusader. These are the things that these young ladies who are looking for heroes and finding them in Beyonce and finding them in Nicki Minaj, who are beautiful sisters, both inside and outside. And I don't have problems with my sisters and their brilliance and their talent, but I do have a problem when our young ladies only have those particular avenues to find their heroes. This is indeed a miseducation and a lack of knowledge. So when we talk about February, Black History Month, and the importance, yes, we do need to begin to reshape those who will be injected in the mainstream conversation. And we do need to be very clear about how Dr. Carter G. Woodson's ideas and his vision are continuing and still have the presence to make a change in someone's life. The knowledge as small as a seed, a mustard seed, can change one's reality. So when we talk about February, Black History Month, when we talk about Negro History Week, all of this was put together to raise the way that we looked at one another with accurate information, nothing that's made up, but to be able to suspend the dehumanizing process that America has taken the black man, woman, and child and continues to force them through. Then we have a counter narrative that combats with truth, with accuracy, that will again be part of the process of rebuilding a new nation. So yes, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad said it well. He said, we are a nation within a nation. Agreed. We are that portion of America, well, the wilderness of North America, that is still shy, that is still looked to as a problem. And when we look at a very famous theory, the famous theory is the Negro problem, the Negro question. And the Negro question reads, what should be done with the presence of the troublesome Negro for maximum exploitation? When we put that in February, in Dr. Carter G. Woodson's vision, we begin to want to have a different narrative. We begin to want to talk about black power more specifically, not on just the heels of civil rights movement, but as something that had happened, something that had been a part of us since our initial connection to America. So when we say 1619 to 1865, and people say, when did the black freedom movement start? It started the day the first ship landed here in the wilderness of North America. Indeed, we have to pay attention to his vision. I'm very serious about the youngest person who happens to be watching now is the most important. And if that young person, that young black person does not have framework for what has come before him, then his brilliance may be looked to without proper light, and it may be dissipated, and potential delayed is truly potential denied. We want to make sure that all our young people understand that they have heroes who look just like them. And some of them did not sing and dance. Some of them did not shoot a ball through the hoop. Some of them did not hit a ball with a bat. Some of them were so very serious about what the future would look like, they left plans behind. They gave their lives and their livelihood so that the young generation that's coming before us could be better off than we were and than we are right now. Agreed. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, February 1926, to what we know today, definitely needs to have a makeover. We don't need to lose any of our heroes in this makeover, but we do need to add heroes to make our intervention in the affairs of our young people more plausible, more creditable, and gives them more insight about exactly what they will face. So I say to you, February is not the month that you look to alone for Black History Month. It took McDonald's to say Black History Month 365 days a year, which indeed itself was ripped off from things that had come before. So please do not buy into McDonald's taking that thought and making it popular. Not true. But February is a very important time for us to reflect. But our history is every day. Our history is being made right now. In Flint is history about how those who control America really feel about blacks. You can go back to Hurricane Katrina and look at these contemporary movements about how America feels about this portion of the population that has been a problem, that has been stuck at the mud of civilization legally and systematically by a hierarchy that ties into those who will be traducers, auxiliaries, who just so happen to be black. Indeed, it is important that we have a historical log, an accurate roll call of those who are our greatest and their accomplishments to be mastered by us, to be forwarded to our youngest populations for their own veracity and for the upliftment of our entire population. Yes, indeed, we are building a new world. Nation building, building nation. This is one portion, that our accurate history be told by those who are vested and not by those who are compensated. Again, what a wonderful time to look over some of the most famous and to white America, some of the most infamous ideas of black unity. This is indeed a great time to sit down with your children, and if you don't have those particular skills, or you have not been one that's been well read, and you do have access to the internet, be very careful on how you go about using that access, but use it to your best ability. We will find out that our students and our children are a bit more tuned and can handle this entire saga more than we give them credit for. So Black history is indeed well on its way to making itself over, and we need to be there to document it and to praise those who, when they get it right, they get it right. Let us never forget the vision of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, Godwin, representative of his connection to a higher being. Indeed, we salute you, Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Without you, we would be not as good as we are. In fact, we'd be a lot worse off. Without question, we appreciate your vision and your thought, and we will continue to use February as our baseline and our place of the ability to speak in public about our history. Ladies and gentlemen, this information may in no means change your mind, but because truth and you are so very important to me, I just thought you ought to know. I remain with esteem and respect, Brother Frederick Douglass Dixon, a distinguished man of color. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Carter G. Woodson.